So, what is the number one psychoactive columnar called? We're talking about San Pedro. I've called it San Pedro a bunch today. I've called it a columnar. I've called it Echinopsis. I've called it Trichocereus. Its genus is Pachinoi. I don't know the etymology of Pachinoi. I just don't. But when you refer to grandfather or Wachuma or San Pedro or Trichocereus pachynoid or Echinopsis, we're all talking about the same plant, which is pretty incredible and pretty darn confusing. And so I'm one of the guys who has a problem calling them grandfather because when I'm in the medicine community, I'm hanging out, I'm at a ceremony, I'm taking medicine, we're just doing our thing. And someone will say, I had a grandfather experience or ceremony. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Well, was it Wachuma or was it Trichocereus pachinoi or was it Brigesi? Was it Peruvianus? Was it a blend with, other plant types? Or are you talking about peyote? Because the difference between a peyote experience and a San Pedro experience are really different. The difference between a San Pedro experience versus, let's just say, a Peruvian torch versus a Bolivian torch is a very, very different experience. And so, what are we trying to do? We're trying to communicate with each other. Well, what are you trying to say? That you did this thing called grandfather. Okay. But if people call this grandfather and this grandfather, but they're not the same thing, does it mean they're all still grandfather? That's where it gets hard, right? And then why do they call it grandfather? Oh, of course, because ayahuasca is the female energy. And so this is her counterpart plant, as it's known in many native cultures in South America. And so this is why it's grandfather. Or it has phallic appearances. Or it's known that when you do ayahuasca, grandmother medicine shows you what you need to change, but grandfather medicine gives you the strength to make the change. These are all ideas. These are all different opinions. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't agree with. At the end of the day, the only thing that I think I'm trying to say is I don't think it makes sense to call the entire spectrum of cacti medicine to be one thing grandfather because it's not all the same thing. That is the point I'm trying to make. And if you think this is a lot of names, these are all of the different names in South America for this one plant, San Pedro. Oh, why do they call it San Pedro? Well, because during the Spanish conquistadors annihilating native religion for Christianity, which is something that I have a difficulty with when it comes to some peyote culture in North America, which we might be able to talk about later, but don't need to go too deep into that. But basically when the Spanish came and they were trying to talk to the natives about this plant, and the natives are explaining this plant brings you to the heavens. It gives you information, downloads messages from the heavens. The Spanish tried to explain to the native peoples that only St. Peter has the keys to the heavens from their theological perspective, and that this plant doesn't have the ability, only St. Peter does. And so the natives are like, well, that's just silly because you obviously haven't tried this plant. So we'll just appease you and call the plant St. Peter. So in Spanish, San Pedro, which is also very similar to marijuana. If you don't know the history, the 500-year-old really incredible history of the word marijuana, you should check out my YouTube called the something like just YouTube word marijuana Max Montrose or Trichome Institute. Your mind will be blown. It's a 30-minute education that will blow your mind. So, anyways, that's why it's called San Pedro. This is a good example of how big these plants can get, and this one's not even that big. This is just a good-sized, mature Trichocereus brigesi. How do I know it's brigesi? Because it's blue, not green. Its needle structure is long. Is it as long as Peruvianus? No. Look at how it's spaced out. So the spacing of the needle, the length of the needle, the color of the needle, the rib structure, the size, and the color of the cacti all obviously tell you that, my friends, is the Bolivian torch. and a good sized one too. And then when it comes to these trichocereus types, it's like, well, what's the deal, right? Like, why are these plants sacred? It's due to their chemistry. And to me, the chemically detectable psychedelic properties of these plant types are their spirit energy. It's just the same thing. You're just using different words. Hardening is a spirit, the way that mescaline is a spirit. And so these plants grow these spirit mixtures. And these spirit mixtures give you different opportunities that you wouldn't have without you downloading these applications into your process server. And they're all just different apps. Some of the apps are more for love. Some of these apps are more for intellect. Some of these applications are better for medicine, and medicine for things that are physical and things that are also spiritual, like PTSD. PTSD is a really serious thing that is something that has hurt someone's spirit, right? And that's why a lot of Western medicine doesn't work for PTSD, but a lot of spiritual medicine does, because what's damaged is your soul. You're spiritually damaged. And so these are spiritual concoctions that, when brewed together and used in really proper and very respectful ways that are set up in intellectually, that's what a ceremony is. Really incredible things can happen. Transformation, healing. And then we have the non-mescaline types. And don't worry, I'm not going to cover all of these. I know we just went through a ton of the San Pedro types. This is going to be very brief.